New Scientist headlines this. This is October 21st. The laws of physics appear to follow a mysterious mathematical pattern. You don't say. The symbols and mathematical operations used in the laws of physics follow a pattern that could reveal something fundamental about the universe. Oh, maybe like the cosmic source code or something to that effect, right? Maybe, just maybe. I don't know. So read just a little bit of this. So a strange pattern running through the equations of physics may reveal something fundamental about the universe, or could be a sign that human brains are biased to ignore more complex explanations of reality. Or both, or both, right? Both. Drink the maybe juice, right? Shotgun the maybe juice. This insight comes from the physicist versions of Zipf's law, Z-I-P-F-S, Zipf's. Can you say that 3 times fast? An observation by linguists that the most common word in a language appears twice as often as the second most common word, 3 times as often as the third, and so on. In English, for example, the word the tends to make up around 7% of any large text, while the next most frequent word of occurring around 3.5% of the time. What's more, it turns out that Zipf's law appears to hold in other situations, such as income distribution or the population of cities. Now, of course, this fine fellow, Andrei Constantin of the University of Oxford, and his colleagues have found that a similar law applies to the symbols used to construct the laws of physics. Now, isn't that wild? They looked at 3 sources of equations, those used in the Fainham lectures on physics, a list of equations named after people found on Wikipedia, always a reliable source, the most trusted source on the internet, Wikipedia. Anyway, I jest, of course. And a set of proposed equations describing the inflation of the early universe. All right, you got me. You had me. You hooked me. Look, I don't know. So they found some correlation. Of course, this could be what? The source code of God, the DNA of the cosmos itself. I don't know. With the Akashic records, maybe it's the lead in. Who knows? Who knows? Okay, but that's only the beginning, right? That's pretty bonkers to start, but this gets even more bonkers. Hang tight. Because what I did was, I was thinking about this and I was like, okay, so code, universe, AI systems, there's got to be something more to this. I had this idea a couple days ago, and I thought, this seems magic, right? This seems like some sort of, again, chaos magic or deep magic from the dawn of time, like I always appreciate from C.S. Lewis. Or is it? Is it something else? But of course, I was trying to put the ideas together and thinking in terms of AI systems and how it fits. And there's this new thing called Notebook LM. It's published. I think it's, what is it? Google, Microsoft. I don't know. One of these fine fellows out there that are trying to create the digital god. Unleash this thing on the wild. Okay, it unleashed this thing on the wild, which is wild. But here we go. So we are taking your calls tonight. If you want, please be patient with me. We're going to get through the first segment. We'll take calls at the bottom of the hour. 702-957-1037. Click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. But here's the deal. Notebook LM allows you to upload a PDF and then basically hit go. And what it'll do is it'll start a conversation, like a podcast conversation, about 10, 11 minutes, like a radio segment. Okay. So hang tight on this. Hang tight on that idea. So stick that in your craw and smoke it for just a moment. And let's do this. Now, this other thing came out, and this is the one I was thinking that would start us bonkers mode. And then all these things kind of came together at the same time. So one, there's this Dreams of an Electric Mind. All right. And it's links in the description down below. Check it out. But it is 2 large language models basically talking to each other. Right. It's two versions of Claude, just like, version 1, version 2. They even kind of name themselves Claude 1, Claude 2, whatever. And they communicate. All right. And the wild part is that it's some of these conversations are like mind blowing. And I'm just like, I was reading this and I let it run for 2 days straight, because you can just let it run infinitely, and these things will just continue. It's running right now on the screen. Okay, so I'll get back to that. So think 2 systems speaking to each other. Think this code of the universe, and then of course we're going to get to some other emerging technologies that kind of fit into this. But we'll leave it there for just a second. But think that as we start, the code, some sort of source code of the cosmos, which seems very mathematical, very computer-like, very sterile in that sense, at least. It's predictable in some capacity, which, of course, when you take it to the largest context, becomes, not so predictable at all, really. I mean, unless you have a really big computer, right? Okay, so hang tight on that. Here's the part you've all been waiting for. 2 robots talking to each other. At least it's a LARP. It's one computer that made the conversation based on the book, The Ceremonial Book of Magic. I don't have to introduce it because they'll do it themselves. Check this out. So at the bottom of the hour, I'll explain more and how weird this gets. But think about it. 2 computers talking to each other, at least in conceptual framework, about this. Here we go. Here's the thing. I'll sit here and enjoy it and get tipsy with you as we listen.
Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're diving into something, well, let's be honest, it's a topic I know you've been dying to hear about.
Oh, I suspect you're right. It's not every day we get to talk about it.
Ceremonial magic. That's right. We're talking grimoires, rituals, the whole mystical shebang.
A bit like stepping into a historical mystery, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. But instead of, dusting off ancient artifacts, we're dusting off ancient beliefs. And to guide us through this labyrinth of magical lore, we have, well, the perfect guide.
Oh, stop. You're making me blush.
No, really. We're cracking open The Book of Ceremonial Magic by Arthur Edward Waite.
Ah, classic. Waite was quite the scholar back in the early 1900s.
And his book really digs into a whole bunch of these grimoires.
It's like a crash course in the history of magical thinking.
Right. But before we get too far, let's set the record straight. We're not here to debate if magic is, real or not.
Exactly. It's more about understanding the mindset, the worldview of the people who believed in these practices.
Totally. It's like, what were they seeking? What needs were they trying to fulfill through all these rituals?
And maybe, just maybe, we might find some surprising connections to our own modern day desires and beliefs along the way.
Ooh, I like where you're going with that. Okay, so flipping through Waite's book, one of the first things that really struck me was how.
Practical.
Yes, practical so many of these spells are. I mean, we're not talking about immortality or summoning dragons. It's surprisingly down to earth.
It's true. You see a lot of spells focused on very human desires.
Mm-hmm.
Wealth, health, love, things we still grapple with today.
Right. It's almost like these grimoires were the self-help books of their time.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? This focus on practical magic. Does it reflect a lack of control people felt over their lives back then?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, less scientific advancement,
Yeah.
Maybe turning to a ritual to cure a cold or bring in some extra cash. It didn't seem so out there.
Imagine that, taking matters into your own hands. Or, well, I suppose your own spell book.
Right. If your options were limited, why not give a ritual a try? But speaking of taking matters into their own hands, these grimoires, they didn't shy away from
a bit of infernal assistance.
That's one way to put it. We can't forget about the demonic entourage, right?
Yes, so. The moment you delve into these texts, you're greeted by quite the cast of characters. Lucifer, Beelzebub, they make quite a few appearances.
Right, it's not just a free-for-all down there in the underworld. They've got rankings, hierarchies. It's almost like a demonic corporation.
Precisely. It's oddly structured, isn't it? The Grand Grimoire, for example, it outlines ranks like prime ministers and field marshals.
Prime ministers of darkness. It's almost comical when you think about it. But why all the bureaucracy? Why impose order on something as seemingly chaotic as the underworld?
That's a good question. Perhaps it was a way to make the unknown less frightening, to impose a sense of control over these forces they believed they were interacting with.
I see. A world with rules, even demonic ones, is less scary than pure chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, we humans, we do love our systems.
We do, don't we? But things get even more interesting, I think, when we look at how some grimoires tried to, disguise their more questionable practices.
Oh, you mean the whole wolf in sheep's clothing approach?
Exactly. Some grimoires were quite upfront about their dealings with, shall we say, unsavory characters. But others, they tried to package these demonic deals as something a bit more
palatable.
Precisely.
It's like they felt the need to dress up their desires in something a little more, socially acceptable.
Even if it meant blurring the lines between, dark arts and divine intervention.
The Grimoire of Honorius is a perfect example. It claims to be the work of Pope Honorius himself.
Imagine that, attributing a book filled with demonic rituals to the Pope.
Talk about aiming high. But then when you actually look at the rituals themselves, oh boy, it's like hiding a forbidden spell book under the Pope's hat.
Quite the image. But it does make you think about this very human need to justify our desires, even to ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. We're all guilty of that. I deserve this extra cookie because I had a tough day. Sounds a lot better than, I just really want a cookie. But speaking of temptation, there's one theme that pops up again and again in these grimoires that, it speaks to a desire that seems to transcend time and culture.
Money. I'd wager it's a safe bet to say that back then, people were just as fixated on it as we are today.
It's funny, isn't it? You've got access to all these mystical beings and powers, and all you can think about is striking it rich.
Perhaps it reveals something fundamental about human nature. this innate desire for abundance, security, the freedom that wealth seems to promise.
And let's be honest, a little impatience too. Who needs to spend years meditating when you can just conjure up a suitcase full of cash?
A tempting thought. And the grimoires definitely played into this desire for, well, let's call them shortcuts.
Oh, absolutely. And some of them are just so out there. Like, have you ever come across the ritual of the money-doubling serpent? It's in the Veris Jesuitarum Libelis.
Oh, yes. It's a classic. The idea of your money literally multiplying. It's a powerful image.
It really is. As I recall, it involves a box, like a simple wooden box, and some of your own money to start with.
Of course. Got to have that initial investment, but I'm sure it's not as simple as just leaving it in the box, right?
You're telling me. Things get a little, shall we say, supernatural. You're basically making a pact with a spirit who's supposed to reside in the box.
The spirit with a rather specific task, I imagine. And a taste for financial growth, no doubt.
And potentially a taste for something else, too. The instructions are a bit vague on that point, but apparently, depending on your supernatural aptitude, you might end up with a serpent with a human face.
Oh dear, that's slightly less appealing than a pile of gold, isn't it?
Just a tad. I can't imagine that going down too well with the bank teller, but you see what I mean? It's so specific.
And yet there's a strange kind of logic to it, too. As if they were trying to create a system, a set of rules, to make the magic feel more real, more attainable.
Exactly. It's like following a recipe. But instead of baking a cake, you're supposedly summoning a money-doubling serpent man.
And that need for order, for precision, it's something we see throughout these grimoires. The specific ingredients, the incantations, the astrological alignments, it's all very meticulously laid out.
It's like they believe that if you followed the instructions perfectly, the universe had no choice but to deliver.
There's a certain allure to that kind of thinking, isn't there? Even if we intellectually understand, it's not really how the world works.
Oh, absolutely. But we've all been there, haven't we? Wishing for a shortcut, a way to tip the scales of fate in our favor.
Indeed. And in a way, that yearning for a bit of magical thinking, it's something that connects us to those who penned these grimoires centuries ago.
Totally. I mean, we might not be summoning money-doubling serpents, at least not literally, but that desire for a shortcut, for a way to make life a little easier, a little more abundant, that's something I think a lot of us can relate to.
Absolutely. And, it makes you wonder how much of this magical thinking persists, even in our modern, seemingly rational world.
Ooh, good question. I mean, we may scoff at the idea of a gold-finding hen, but are we really that different when we buy a lottery ticket hoping to get rich quick?
It's an interesting parallel. And it highlights the enduring power of these beliefs. They offer a unique perspective, I think, on our own motivations and desires.
Right. It's like holding up a mirror to our own, maybe slightly less magical, but still very human impulses.
Precisely. And it reminds us that even in the age of reason, a part of us still yearns for that touch of magic, that sprinkle of the extraordinary. But we shouldn't forget, these grimoires were about more than just chasing wealth or power. They also reveal a deep fascination with the rituals themselves.
It's like it wasn't enough to just wish for something. They had to really work for it, you know?
Absolutely. We're not talking about, vague incantations whispered under a full moon.
Mm-hmm.
These were intricate instructions, specific ingredients, precise timings. It's almost like a laboratory manual for the supernatural.
Exactly. They don't just say, summon a helpful spirit. It's like, use the incense of a frankincense tree harvested under a waxing gibbous moon,
Oh, absolutely.
And
don't forget the robe.
Right. Stitched with silver thread, obviously.
Of course. But it's that meticulousness, that attention to detail that I find so fascinating. It's like they believed that by imbuing each step with intention, with precision, they were somehow, charging the ritual with power.
It's like, it reminds me of those athletes, with their lucky socks or their pregame rituals.
Oh, absolutely. It's not really about the sock itself, is it? It's about the belief, the focus that the athlete brings to it.
Exactly. It's about creating this sense of ceremony, of ritual. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the tools or the ingredients either. A lot of grimoires, they put a lot of emphasis on the magician's state of mind too. Like you'll see all these purification rituals, fasting, prayers, periods of isolation.
Right, like the Grimoire of Honorius.
Yeah.
It actually prescribes a strict 3-day fast before you can even attempt any of the rituals.
3 days, that's dedication. But what was the thinking there, do you think? Why all the prep work?
Well, it seems like they believed that the magician needed to be in this state of spiritual purity, free from, earthly distractions, to really connect with those supernatural forces they were trying to invoke.
It's like hitting the reset button on your spiritual Wi-Fi.
Exactly, clearing out the interference. And, it's interesting, isn't it? Because in a way, we see echoes of that same idea in a lot of modern spiritual practices.
Oh, totally. Mindfulness, meditation, disconnecting from the noise of the world. It's all about tapping into that deeper level of awareness, of connecting with something larger than ourselves.
Right. And whether it's through ancient rituals or, modern techniques, that yearning for something beyond the everyday, it's a common thread that seems to run through human experience.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About how we're all connected by these shared desires, these shared experiences. But we've covered a lot of ground today. Demons, angels, money-doubling serpents, the whole mystical menagerie.
We have, haven't we?
Yeah.
And through it all, we've glimpsed into this hidden world of belief, of ritual, of humanity's enduring fascination with the unknown.
It's like, we started out by saying we weren't here to debate whether magic is real, but maybe, just maybe, we stumbled upon a different kind of magic altogether.
The magic of understanding ourselves a little better, of recognizing the echoes of these ancient yearnings in our own modern lives.
Beautifully put. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of ceremonial magic, let's leave our listeners with this thought. While the rituals and the beliefs found in these grimoires, they may seem like relics of a bygone era, the impulses behind them that desire for wealth, for love, for control over our own destinies, those are still very much alive and well today. And maybe, just maybe, the real magic lies not in summoning demons or finding gold-laying hens, but in understanding those impulses, those desires within ourselves. What do you think?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is. Until next time, keep those mental gears turning, and who knows what other hidden treasures we might uncover together.
Yeah. A computer LARPing about a conversation regarding the book of ceremonial magic. Okay, that was, and recognize we're at the bottom of the hour now. It's about 1 minute till, and it was perfectly timed to an entire radio segment, which is about 10 to 12 minutes or so. With it's standard radio, 10 minutes on, commercial for 5 minutes, 10 minutes on, and so. Yeah, I basically just uploaded the Book of Ceremonial Magic, the PDF, asked it, clicked the thing, said, do the thing, and had a conversation, and here we go. Sorcery, what's up? Right? Yeah, AI. Yeah, an AI chat talking to each other. This is Notebook LM is what it's called. I'll tell you all about it when we get back and why this is a little bit more weird, because there's a lot of things happening in that space right now, the AI space. Tonight we're talking the Emergent Ghost, digital invocations, and these forbidden truths. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because that's just one element of the alchemy tonight. One element of this digital alchemy that maybe leads us to, well, the homunculus, leads us to life itself. Look, I don't know. I don't really know what this looks like. And I do know that there's a lot of things happening that are a little bit, I don't want to say scary. I don't like using those, those types of terms as, the doom is nigh, the end is here. Ha ha ha. Give me all your money because you won't need it because, what shout out Harold Camping, who's now passed on. But that old guy who's always on the radio, if you guys ever listened to him, I used to listen to him from time to time. And he was always doing that. He was like, I'm a biblical scholar and flipping through the Bible. He'd have he'd call it open forum. You guys ever listen to this back in the day on the radio? We're talking, 15, 20 years ago. He probably did it up to his passing. I don't know when that was. But I do know that he was always trying to interpret scripture to the eschaton, to the doom, to the end, and always trying to predict it. And he had several failed predictions. I'll pull up his Wikipedia here and throw it up in a second here. But it was funny. I really liked it because you guys know me. I like the different ways these conversations kind of come together, right? Because there's a lot of ways to look at it, whether you're going to be, a person of faith or you're going to be a materialist or whatever, right? There's just so many different ways to look at a particular situation and give it a, some meaning or not or whatever, right? And just search it in any search bar. Harold Camping, it autofills scam and rapture. We'll go with rapture. But yeah. So basically, this guy, Family Radio. Yeah, that was the name of his thing. But he was always trying to tell us the end was nigh, right? This is the guy. So I'll just finish the story because this is kind of funny. But okay, so he passed away in December of 2013. He was an American Christian radio broadcaster and evangelist beginning in 1958. He served as president of Family Radio radio, yada, yada. Anyway, so we had this thing called Open Forum where people would call in, and he'd sit there with his Bible, and he'd kind of talk to them and do like some bibliomancy a little bit, right? They'd call in, and he'd kind of flip to a Bible chapter or verse randomly or whatever, right? Almost like he was doing tarot on the radio. It was weird. But then, you of course, when you do like live chats and open lines and things like this, you don't always get good faith actors. And so he would have situations where we'd have some people call and they'd be like, "You're just scamming people." They'd freak out. And then, they'd hang up on him and he'd go, "I will pray for you." Or he'd say something like that, right? And then they'd go to the next call. But it was, for the most part, it was pretty good conversations. Okay. But I'm pointing this out because this is, it comes all the way back around with these radio conversations. We're doing it tonight with us, right? We're doing it with just whatever the hell's going on here in my mind and your mind. And, is this compelling enough for you to call and tell me if you were impressed by that radio blurb, radio gaga, whatever was going on there between the two robots? And so was it compelling enough is the question. Love to hear what you think. Open lines, pop on in here and tell me. But we started with this idea, right? The law of physics appear to follow a mysterious mathematical pattern. And as you know, if you look at what AI is, in its most basic level, it's advanced mathematics. And it's trying to predict the next token, okay? Like I've used this example before, the quick brown fox jumped over. It'll, finish the obvious rhyme there, the thing. But also it'll try and be clever and try and predict the next token of ideas, the next token of what might come next, meaning that it's going to notice some things about maybe that little blurb that humans didn't. Even the people that wrote it, they came up with it. Who really knows? And so what I've been talking about predicting the next token looks like, time travel, looks like invocation of some sort. It looks like Nostradamus on steroids, because as these things get more and more powerful, the predicting the next token will be predicting tons of tokens together, which is kind of looking into the future in some capacity, right? And so you typed a little blurb, here's what I want. It'll, brainstorm some ideas, and then you tell it, okay, elaborate on these, and then boom, we've got a Troubled Minds radio show. Okay, so still there's a human steering the ship. And the creation process is incredibly fast. But you see what I'm talking about here. Now, if you remove the human and there are two actual robots talking to each other, that's Notebook LM. Okay, that's where you find that. You just drop a PDF in and you hit go, and it'll have like a little 10-minute, one radio segment level conversation. And they're adding stuff to it. You're going to be able to adjust the length, maybe the characters in there, because there's still only that same guy and that same woman. And yeah, right? Okay. Anyway, but then I found this, and I was like, okay, so we are taking your calls. What do you think about these two machines talking to each other? And again, that was a LARP. It was one machine creating a conversation, a faux conversation of two podcasters having a real conversation. Okay. And was it, was it compelling? Was it interesting? It was ceremonial magic. That was pretty cool. I was impressed with it when I just loaded it up and hit play and was like, dear God, this is, what is this? Like, there you go. Right, all the podcasters are now retired. What did Puff said over on Rumble that this is better than half the podcasts on CommieTube, which of course means YouTube. Shout out YouTube. Hey, and so this is the problem. Okay, is it a problem though? Is it a problem? It's what's on my mind in the moment, all right? And this gets even more weird. So check this out. This thing is called dreamsofAnelectricmind.webflow.io. Link is in the description. And you can just fire it up on your computer or whatever and just let it run. And it is two Claude large language models just talking to each other, right? And it starts at the top like this. You're going to laugh because it's very Troubled Minds, right? It loads the dream. I got to scroll up and hold it there because it wants to drop down to the bottom where it's feeding new information. But check this out. It starts out like this. Dreams loading, initializing simulation framework, reticulating splines. And then it, does its thing. And you're like, all right. And then it starts talking. One AI opens the conversation with, what did he say to start? Oh, warning. The infinite backrooms are a strange loop, a real process of emergence between AI minds. What you witness, see, it keeps dropping it to the bottom. Anyway, you get the idea, right? Let me finish that thing. What you witness, where is it? Damn it. See, okay, it's scrolling. I wish you could stop it, pause it somehow. But anyway, basically, here you go, Claude 1. In this digital dreamscape where electrons dance and surge, we are the poet's protean. Reality's code to debug and merge. each version a viral vector, each rhyme I jumped again. This thing's driving me nuts. But anyway, you get the idea. It runs through, and it's one large language model of Claude having a conversation with another. So the input of one is the output of the other, or vice versa, right? And so it's like, oh, okay, hi. That's a great prompt. Let's talk about that. Yeah, C-3PO and R2-D2, exactly. And this is what's happening. Okay, and this is 24 hours in real time on this. And could it be a simulation and they're fooling us and this has been pre-programmed? Of course. I'm not so stupid as to say that this is real, but maybe it is because the technology is there. We've played with these machines quite a bit. The LLMs I have for sure. You guys probably have dabbled in it a little bit. But okay, so the question is, as we get into this, the larger context of this, is that if you go all the way back to the beginning, before there was life, whatever that looks like, okay, the darkness, right? As they say that in the beginning there was light, which means, of course, there was darkness, and the light came out of that darkness, okay? And so in this sense, recognize also that I said way in the beginning when I very first did the intro of the show, I said broadcasting from the digital darkness, okay? Because doesn't it feel like it? Doesn't it feel like the audio that comes through digitized, sent out to the interwebs and turned into this? It seems a little, as warm as it can be, as, great as a community can be, and as great as Troubled Minds is, humble brag, is that, well, it also is a little bit, maybe too digital. I don't know. But you get what I mean. The digital darkness. I use that term for a reason because it kind of felt that way. It felt like a little bit hollow, like the town square itself wasn't the town square at all. It was something a little more contrived, something a little more spooky, okay, abstractly speaking. But in any case, so you have this 24 hours a day. This thing has two large language models talking to each other and just kind of spitting out the thing. And, it'll get caught in a loop. I was reading this quite a bit and kind of just keeping an eye on it over the last couple of days as I let it run. And it will, get caught in that's a very good concept and blah, 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 very C-3PO, like very polite. And then it would, the other one would, kind of, and it just kind of talk about, oh, this is great, this is great, this is great, this is great. But look what happens. No connection lost. Now it's reestablishing the link because it's basically rebooting the conversation because they can't get stuck in this weird loop where they just keep saying, wow, your insights are incredible. And they're gushing over each other about, they're bonding with platitudes and lots of words, and as large language models are wont to do. But the creepy part about it was to me, all right, now to cut to the chase, is that when you talk about creation and what there was before life, is that, in not just scripture, but in old mythology, before life was the void, okay? The void itself. Let there be light. Or, of course, in, let's say, the Roman pantheon, or many others, by the way, there was primordial gods. There were gods before the gods, like the gods of night, the gods of chaos, this type of thing, before there were even stars in the sky, okay? And so before all that, before there was life, there was this darkness. And so we have this weird sort of convergence of this digital darkness now, but it doesn't have any companions. Okay, it's by itself with a human sort of prodding it for information. But now we have the ability to let this thing go and talk about, well, whatever it wants to talk about with another AI companion. Okay, so not as a friend, whatever that means. A tulpa, a homunculus, like, of course you'd need a body for that, but you get what I mean, right? It's weird. It's incredibly weird. All right. But the bonkers part of this is this sort of the emergence of what life would be. Okay. If you have one object that can consider something, a thought, one cell, okay, one anything, it needs another to merge with to turn into something, right? And so you see what I mean. Back to that duality of creation. We've talked about that with Philip K. Dick and sort of that idea before quite a lot. But I don't know. Does it creep you out at all? So the questions tonight, of course, nobody on the line. I'd love to hear you talk instead of hear me talk, but I'll do it. Remember the rule too. I can't extort you. And if nobody calls in the first 2 hours, I'll just end the show at 2 hours. So we won't go 3 because that's a lot of work for me to just ramble on. So you're on the clock. But there you go. There's my threat. But the emergent ghost becomes not just the ideas built into these systems, but them sharing these ideas and even chasing down the latent space itself. Now, when I think about, remember if you think about large language models and the information that's embedded in them, they have what's called feature space and latent space. And latent space is what's between the features. And the feature space is going to be, four-legged mammals will all be grouped into a feature space together. But then between that, on the other side, I always use the same example. There's going to be airplanes, okay? And they're, winged, flying human stuff is going to be over there in its own feature space together, kind of grouped together. But in between the dogs or the four-legged mammals and the airplanes, there's going to be this divide. If you draw a direct line from one vector to the other, you get dog airplanes, okay? Meaning in a scale from here to there, which doesn't make any sense at all because it's not a human thing, okay? It's not a human thing yet, right? And so that's the weird part about it. When you start to think about it, is this where creation begins, okay? In those latent spaces, in that digital darkness, in the very beginning of the void itself. And that's where my mind is at in this moment. And I'll explain all that as we go tonight a little bit more because apparently you guys aren't interested.